Hey guys, welcome back to Let's Build Disney. Best achieves the look that I want. And now this is where things get tricky with the build. The very top of the castle has two towers on the front corners and a load of really intricate stonework along the top. There's a lot of fancy windows, a lot of complicated roofs, and a lot of extra tertiary buildings that have loads and loads of windows and complicated patterns in. And when you do a big build like this, especially when you're copying something, there are moments when you suddenly just get overwhelmed and you look at what you're doing and think, whoa, this is actually a really big project and this is going to take a lot of time. So it's important to just stop, take a step back, and remember that don't worry. I mean, all you need to do is build step by step, small baby bites. Even if you've got the biggest meal in front of you, if you just take one mouthful every 10 minutes, eventually it will be eaten. And that's a weird analogy, but it's actually true. If you just keep chiseling away, keep building blocks, eventually you will complete the build. Your biggest ally when you're building something like this is time and patience. And that's all you need to achieve something really big and spectacular. Just have faith in yourself and faith in your abilities. And in fact, that could be true for all walks of life. Trust in your own abilities. Now, there are parts of this building that have, or seem to have, just blue bricks, like the bricks we've used on rooftops. So I've added the blue bricks here as part of the wall for this top part of the central keep. And now again, this is another fancy window, a lot like the window at the front of the castle. So again, I'm using a very similar design and a very similar way, a similar theme to achieve the things I want to from this window. That being a very, very, very steep nether brick roof, stone brick etched pillars as bracing, and then I'm also going to be using the same old technique that we had before of putting orange stained glass with glowstone blocks behind it. Now the rooftop splits off midway into the castle and makes a kind of T shape. So I had to plumb that in correctly and get that looking all nice and neat and flush. And then fill in the back as well with even more nether brick blocks and steps. Now it was time to come around to the left side, or as we see it on the right, and build one of the small tertiary buildings on the outside. This was a bit thin though, and I think I expanded it just a little bit. But this is a large building around the back that just has a few windows in it. Now, because this is quite high up and far away from the camera, we can get away with building this building slightly smaller than it should be. But we'll have to remember our sense of scale, because if you build one thing smaller than it has to be, you have to build everything else of equal distance, the same scale. So that's what we're doing right now. We're just putting down these blue bricks, and don't they look fancy? They look spectacular. And we're also building up this tower at the back. Now, for the Disney Castle build, there are two main towers. There's one on the left, which doesn't quite reach up very high, and there's one on the right that really does scrape the sky. Now, I had some trouble building the tower on the right, the big one, because we actually hit the roof of the world, and we couldn't build any higher before we'd actually completed the build. Luckily, though, it was only on the very tip of the roof, so we could get away with it. So what I'm doing here is building the second tower on the left using stone brick as a cylinder effect. And there's not much to say about this apart from the fact that I'm using stone brick steps to detail the peaks here. And if you look at the picture of the castle, if you look at pictures of the Disney Castle, there's lots of different ways to build it. And that's the funny thing, when you go to Disneyland, when you go to Disney World, and when you see it in movies and in games, the Disney Castle always looks a little bit different. So in a lot of ways, we can get away with pretty much whatever we want when we build our own version. But one thing's for sure, you always have these two very tall reaching towers around the back. And now once that tower was in place, I added some detail. You can see here, I've added a lot more stone brick pillars. I've added some fence posts, and I've also replaced some of the stone brick with upside down steps. I liked the lighting, but I had to remove some of that glowstone because it didn't quite look right. And now with that tower complete, I came around and added the windows. Now some of these windows are carved into the roof, so I carved those in with nether brick steps, added some orange stained glass, and plonked behind some glowstone. You can't really see that very well because it's still daytime, but don't worry, when we turn it to night, you'll really be able to see this castle glow. Now there's 6 more windows directly underneath those windows on the roof. And if you look at most pictures of the Disney Castle at night, some of the windows don't glow at all. Some of the lights are off, and obviously some of the lights are on, because not everybody is in the house. Now, what I wanted to do with this castle, and one of the things that you have to do, a lot of the walls are lit up by massive floodlights, but the way Minecraft works, you can't really put in floodlights like that. There are mods that add floodlights, but I didn't want to get into those. Instead, what I did was I used a mod called Invisolights, and what that does is it lets you put down little invisible glowstones. And you can't see them, but they produce light all the same. Now it's time to add some more detail to this very top section of the tower, and I'm using, again, the quartz effect that I used before on the windows at the front. And again, just decorating these windows in the building on the left, using the stained glass and glowstone. And now there's another tower that leans off from the side of this small building. It's very discreet, and unless you're studying the picture, you might not even notice it. But it's another one of the spires that goes towards making the entire piece work. When you look at the Disney Castle as a whole, there's a lot of just things you can't skip doing because they really do make the build. And one of those is all the spires, just the sheer amount of peaked spirey rooftops that are on the build, and you have to get as many of these in as possible, otherwise the whole build just won't look correct. And that's what we're doing here. We've built this tower, and we're finishing it off finally with some of these blue nether brick steps and bricks. And most of the rooftops in this build kind of have a curved effect. And when I say curved, I mean imagine like an old school wizard hat, like you'd imagine Gandalf to have. And that's what most of the tower tops look like. They look like Gandalf hats. And to get that look, you have to start shallow, you have to have a slow slope, but then quickly the peaked roof has to steeply climb up. Now again, after I'd completed the first smaller tower, it was time to come around to the main tower. Now this tower gave me a lot of headaches because it was such a real pain to build. I built it out of wool here first, because the great thing about wool is you can go back and change all the wool to stone brick with very little trouble. And I'm glad I did that initially because I did make a few boo-boos, a few mistakes. For one, this whole tower is a little bit too close to the main tower. I had to move it slightly outwards to the right, but I do that later after I put in some detail and experimented with a few techniques for etching off the tower sides. Now again, some of the walls in this tower seem to be a little bit blue, so I'm using these nether brick blocks and steps to create that blue effect. And now you can see I've actually moved the tower over, but I did it off camera in a sneaky way. Now there's a large window etched with sandstone or etched with like a lighter brick. So I'm using sandstone for that. I'm using orange stained glass. And of course I'm lighting it up with glowstone behind it. And I'm really happy with how that window looks. I'm etching the borders, etching the corners, if you could say there are corners, because this tower isn't really a cylinder. In a lot of ways it's more like a hexagon. And to be honest, because it's Minecraft, it is definitely a hexagon instead of a cylinder. But that's okay because it lets me have clear defined corners that I can etch more detail into accurately. Now again, because this is a tower and I want it somewhat symmetrical, I can use our old trick of only really building a quarter of it. So that's what you see me here doing now. I'm only going to be building roughly a quarter to a half of the tower, and then when I'm happy with the entire tower built like that, I can copy the whole thing and paste it around and keep things very symmetrical. And this tower just reaches up in a way that you'd expect any other tower to, with etched stone brick as pillars. I started to build up, and it does get thinner and wider at different parts. It's got like a lot of different things going on with this tower. It's quite tricky, and like I said, this is the one that gave me a lot of headaches in terms of getting things symmetrical and getting my proportions right. But here we go, just continuing to build up, and it does get slowly thinner towards the top. I'm using stone brick and stone brick steps here, near the very top. But as you can see, if you can see the tower at the background, the back left there, that's actually a smaller tower, and that means we're going way higher with this one, way higher. But also the rooftop, the peaked roof on this main tower reaches up a lot higher than the other tower. Also, it's very spiky, and to get that spiky effect, I'm going to be using nether brick stairs. So again, just etching in more details to this pillar, more details to the tower, using stone brick and stone brick steps, and all the little half blocks and step blocks I can find, because your best ally in adding detail to anything is half blocks and steps. And now you can see the whole tower copy and pasted 3 or 4 times around symmetrically. And we're just about ready to start building the very tall spire section. Now again, using these etched stone brick steps and these etched stone brick pillars, I'm again only completing a quarter of the top tower and then copy and pasting that around. Now you remember that I said this tower is very spiky and pointy. To achieve that effect, what I'm going to be using is upside down nether brick steps, because that gives you this kind of spiky, juttery, lean out effect. Now you see where that fence post reaches up to the top? That's the very height of the world. You cannot build any higher than that. But I think we got a pretty accurate looking spire out of this. And now it was time to build the main Disney flag. Now the way I'm doing this is I'm using 2 shades of blue, a lighter blue at the front and a darker shade of blue just behind the flag. And what this does is it works as a kind of like shading. So it's a kind of like a dirty kind of artist's trick to fool the eye into thinking there's some shading there. And wow, as you can see the towers picked off against the background, you can really see this build coming to life. I've added enough detail now that it actually looks like we're getting there with serious progress being made. I'm really starting to think that I'm doing this build justice, and I'm really happy with the way it's going. I really can't wait until next episode. But hey, here you go. This is what the thing looks like at night at the moment, but we're still a long way from being finished. So tune into next episode, which is the final episode, where we finally finish Let's Build a Disney Castle. Hit like and favorite and subscribe, and I will see you guys next episode for some more Let's Build a Disney Castle. So until next time, guys, take care.